September 1968. Ouray County, Colorado, a film crew had been working the canyon country for 11 days, shooting what the studio had quietly taken to calling John Wayne's last real shot at the Academy Award. Nobody said that to his face. What happened in the 40 minutes before the crew reached location that morning would determine whether John Wayne played Rooster Cogburn or became him. Earl Bodine, 74 years old, former United States Marshal of Ouray County, had worked the land in the Uncompahgre Valley for 31 years. By the morning of September 12th, a man with a manila folder and a polite voice was on his way to take it from him. Here is the story. The diner in Ridgway sat on the state road between the canyon walls and the valley floor. It was called Mabel's, though Mabel Hooper had been dead since 1954, and nobody had seen a reason to change the sign. The counter ran the full length of the east wall, chrome stools with red vinyl seats, worn white in the center from 4 decades of ranch hands, road crews, and men who had no one to eat breakfast with at home. A bun machine started running at 4:45 in the morning, and you could smell it from the gravel lot. The radio in the back window caught 3 stations out of Grand Junction, and when it was off, you could hear the creak. Earl Bodine had been sitting at the second stool from the left for 11 years. Same stool, same order. Black coffee, 2 eggs over medium, toast dry, no plate of anything else. He left $1.25 on the counter every time, the same as the first morning he came in, even after the prices went up. Mabel Hooper's daughter never said a word about it. He had served as marshal from 1933 to 1964. 31 years. He had ridden into 19 situations in that time that most men would have found convincing reasons to ride away from. He had a buckshot scar along his left cheekbone from a cattle thief's scattergun in November of 1943, and he had lost the eye 2 inches above it in the same incident. Both barrels, barn doorway, no light, no warning. He wore a plain black patch on a thin cord, and he did not talk about it with anyone who had not been there. He did not talk about any of the 19 situations. That was not how he was built. When he retired, he stayed on the land he had bought in 1937 at the north end of the valley. He ran 20 head of cattle, which a neighbor worked on shares by then. He mended fence in the fall when the ground was still soft enough to drive posts. He grew a kitchen garden every summer, squash, pole beans, tomatoes that came in hard by July. When his wife Doris died in 1961, he kept the garden going. She had laid out those beds. It did not seem right to let something she had made go back to sod. The property taxes had been running behind since 1966. The county had sent 4 notices. Earl had sent 4 partial payments in envelopes with short handwritten notes. What remained outstanding on the morning of September 12, 1968, was $2,300. The man from the Ouray County Assessor's Office was named Gerald Purcell. He had driven up from Montrose the evening before and stayed at the motel on the south edge of Ridgway. He had a manila folder on the passenger seat with Earl's name typed on the tab. He was not unkind. He had done this particular thing 7 times that year, and he had learned to be thorough and quiet about it. He pulled into Mabel's lot at 6:15. Earl was already at his stool. A man in a canvas work jacket and a battered tan Stetson had come in 15 minutes before Purcell and taken the booth at the far end of the counter. He had ordered coffee. He had not opened the menu. He was looking out the window at the road. Purcell sat down at the stool beside Earl's and set the folder on the counter between them. He kept his voice low. He explained, the way a man explains a thing he has explained many times before, that the county could extend no further grace periods, that the assessor's office carried an obligation to all the other property owners, in Ouray County. That $2,300 was the amount, and there was no provision that changed it. Earl listened. He held his coffee cup with both hands. He looked at the laminate counter. He listened. He said he understood. Purcell opened the folder and slid a single form across the counter with a pen already in hand. He said if Earl could sign at the bottom line, it would begin the process in an orderly way, and the county would handle everything that followed. He said he was sorry. Earl looked at the form. The pen lay beside it on the counter. He did not pick it up. 2 of the 3 men down the counter had stopped eating. The cook had come to the pass-through window and was standing there. Mabel Hooper's daughter stood at the far end of the counter with a coffee pot in her hand, not pouring, not moving. 31 years. 19 situations. Doris's garden. $2,300. The man in the far booth was watching. He had not touched his coffee since Purcell sat down. Have you ever watched someone handed a piece of paper that stood for the end of everything they had built and felt the whole room go still around them and nobody move? Drop your state in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. What tipped it was the hat. Earl reached up with both hands and lifted his hat from his head and set it on the counter beside the unsigned form. It was old brown felt, the band dark with 30 years of sweat and weather. He set it down the way a man sets something down when he has made his peace with a thing and is trying to find whatever dignity remains on the other side of it. The man at the far booth did not push his chair back quickly. He set his coffee cup on the table, stood, and walked the length of the counter the way a man walks when the decision is already made and the only thing left is to carry it out. He stopped 2 stools down from Earl and stood there without saying anything until Earl looked up. He said, "You, the marshal who took the buckshot in Ridgeway Canyon in '43? Earl looked at him for a moment. He said he was. The man said, "Read about it somewhere. County history pamphlet they put out a couple of years back. The way I understood it, you went into that barn alone, no backup, no plan worth calling a plan, and you handled the situation." Earl said there hadn't been time for a plan. The man looked at Purcell. His voice did not change. He said, "How much?" Purcell told him. The man reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, and he set cash on the counter. He counted it out in even stacks without looking at Earl or at Purcell, just at the bills. He said, "I've been trying to work out how this character I'm playing got his nerve. A man who'll go into a dark barn alone at night on behalf of a county that isn't paying him what the job is worth. I figure that story is worth $2,300 in research. I'm not doing you any favor. I have a problem, and you can help me solve it." He looked at Purcell. He said, "You take cash." Purcell looked at the money on the counter. He looked at the folder. He said, "Yes, the county took cash." Earl Bodine looked at those bills a long time without moving. Then he looked up at the man standing there. Earl's mouth opened once and didn't find anything, and closed again. The man said, "Put your hat on." Earl put his hat on. Purcell wrote the receipt in silence. He listed the property, the amount, the date, signed it at the bottom. He picked up his folder, stood, and walked out of Mabel's without a word. He did not look back. The cook went back to his grill. The 2 men down the counter went back to their plates. The coffee pot started moving again. Earl said, "I'll pay you back. Give me a year. I'll do it in installments." The man said, "Research." He picked up his coffee cup and walked back to his booth. He finished his coffee in 2 minutes, left bills on the table, walked out to his truck, and drove east toward the canyon. The crew had a 7 o'clock call. Earl Bodine kept the land. He farmed it the way a man of 74 farms, which was not nothing. By the spring of 1970, he had his cattle count back to 23 head. He fixed the south fence line that had been going soft since '65. He put the garden in every season until the spring of 1982, when his son Harold drove down from Denver in late April, and they planted it together, side by side in the beds Doris had laid out, 21 years after she was gone. The deed never left Earl's name. Patricia Bodine was 9 years old on the morning of September 12, 1968. She grew up making summer trips to the Uncompahgre Valley, eating out of the garden, learning the fence lines and the names of the peaks to the south. She studied law in Boulder and passed the Colorado bar in 1985. For the next 31 years, she ran a practice in Denver and took pro bono property tax cases for rural landowners across the state. 67 cases over 3 decades. She won 54 of them. There was a wheat farmer in Prowers County in 1991 who would have lost 4 generations of ground to a tax lien that had compounded past what he could ever pay. Patricia worked that case for 14 months without billing a dollar. She got him clear. He farmed that ground for 18 more years, and his daughter farms it now. Patricia never knew what had kept the valley land in her family. Earl never told her. She found out years later from Harold, after Earl was gone, and even then the account was thin. Harold only had what Earl had let slip once, late in his 80s, at the kitchen table in low light, one night when it came up without warning. In April of 1970, John Wayne stood at the podium of the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion and received the Academy Award for Best Actor for True Grit. Before he said a word, he reached up with one hand and touched the eye patch once. It lasted less than a second. It did not read on camera. Nobody in the room knew what it was for. He gave a short speech. He said he was grateful. He said the Academy had been awful patient with him. And the room laughed the way rooms do when they are glad to be in the presence of a man who does not need the moment to be more than it is. He said a few other things. He walked off the stage. He had worn that patch in every scene of True Grit. He wore it the way a man wears something that belongs to someone else, carefully, like he intended to give it back in good condition. Harold Bodine still has the receipt. Ouray County Assessor's Office, September 12, 1968. Property description. Dollar amount. Gerald Purcell's signature at the bottom. Paid in full. Cash. It is in a frame on the kitchen wall of the house in the Uncompahgre Valley. In the afternoons, when the light comes through the window above the sink at a low angle, it falls across the paper, and you can read every line of it clearly. Earl Bodine. Paid in full. The light moves across it for a while. Then it goes. The paper stays. John Wayne never spoke of the morning at Mabel's diner, not to Henry Hathaway, who directed the picture, not to anyone else in the cast or crew, not to a reporter, not in any interview before the Oscar or after it, not in any letter anybody has ever found. The only record is that receipt on a kitchen wall in Colorado. Some men move through the world with a particular kind of attention, the kind that notices the people a room has already decided not to see. They see the hat come off. They see the pen that isn't being picked up. They understand what it costs a man to sit still and absorb something that has no right to be happening to him. And then they stand up. Not for anyone watching. Not for any story that might be told later. Just because a man set his hat on a counter, and another man understood exactly what that meant. If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't yet. There are more stories like this one, and every one of them deserves to be told. And unfortunately, they don't make men like John Wayne anymore.